They are the sponsors of this wonderful program that we have here. So we're here for Laughter is the Best Medicine. Is that why everyone is here tonight?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I have a couple introductions and then we'll get started with the program. So I first just want to thank Claire and Jerry here for this. It was really Claire's idea, the whole concept. We have monthly meetings and we usually spend half the meeting laughing. So I think that was really part of the idea behind this program. And when we started thinking about how to form the program and some speakers, Claire suggested her friend, Jerry Rosen. He is an amateur comedian, we'll say. So he is going to open the show to kind of get us warmed up. And then we'll roll into our next speaker, and I'll introduce her when it's time for that. So let me introduce Jerry Rosen, our opening act.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I see so many familiar faces, and I've never seen so many people. Can you hear me now? So I've never seen so many friendly faces. I've seen a lot of familiar faces, and you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Yes. Is that good? Okay. So I'm so happy to be here, and I've been looking around the place, and it's absolutely beautiful. I've watched this place grow from when it was just a one building to what it is now, and it's absolutely fabulous. I've wandered around. I got in the elevator before. I was going up to look at some of the places, and there was a crowded elevator. There was a woman in front of the buttons. I couldn't quite get to my button, and I was trying to reach over, and I banged my elbow into her breast, and I said, "Oh." Can you hear me? Okay. So I was getting in the elevator, and I was trying to press the button. There's a woman in the way, and I banged my elbow into her breast, and I said, "I'm so sorry. If your heart is as tender as your breast, I'm sure you'll forgive me." She said to me, "If your pencil's as hard as your elbow, I'm in 2332. So there were some women who were sitting in the hallway up there talking, and I was talking with these women. I walked by and they said, "Hello, are you new here?" I said, "No, I'm just wandering around, exploring." And they said to me, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, guess how old I am." So they said, "I don't know, 73. I said, "No, I'm 82 years old." They said, "Can I hurry?" And I walked down the hall a little further, and there's another woman sitting. She says, "How old are you?" I said, "You can guess too. How old do you think I am?" So she says, "I don't, come closer." So I walk closer. She says, "Come closer." I walk closer. She unzips my fly. She reaches inside. She says, "You're 82 years old." I said, "How could you tell?" I heard you tell the other lady. But there's some women talking. I know there's a big social life here at the club and do a lot of events. And there's a couple of ladies talking. One was saying that she's going out with Irving Steinfink. He asked her to be her date. And I know you went out with him. Can you tell me a little bit about Irving? She says, "Oh, Irving, oh my gosh. He told me he's going to take me out to a fancy restaurant. I went out, I bought an expensive new dress. It cost a fortune. And I bought this dress. He comes to the door. He's got a tuxedo on. He was so handsome. And we go out, and he's got a chauffeur with a big limousine waiting. We went to a fancy restaurant, all the food you could eat. And after the restaurant, we went to the theater, third row center, a wonderful show. And after that, I thought we're done. He takes me out dancing and drinking. And then finally he comes back here, and I invite him in. I said, "Oh, come in, you'll have a cup of coffee." No sooner does the door close behind him than he throws me on the bed, rips off my expensive dress, and he has his way with me twice. So the woman says, "So you're saying I shouldn't go out with him?" "No, we're an old dress." But my wife and I, we've been married 55 years, happily married, most of them, and it's really been wonderful. And back in the days when we got married, you didn't get intimate until after you got married. You know what I mean? You know, these days it's a little different. So we were on our honeymoon. We were both a little nervous. We're in the hotel room. You know, I take off my shoes and socks. And my toes are a little strange. They're a little gnarled and hairy. So she looks at the toes. She says, "What's wrong with your toes?" I said, "Well, when I was a kid, I had polio." She says, "Polio?" I said, "No, polio. It affects your toes." She says, "All right, guess that's all right." And I took off my pants. She looked at my knees. And my knees are all purple and lumpy. And she says, "What's wrong with your knees?" I said, "Well, when I was young, I had measles." She says, "You mean measles?" She says, "No, measles. I had measles." She says, "I guess that's all right." And I dropped my drawers, and she says, "Oh my God, smallpox."
I'm dying to laugh, but I can't because
But listen, none of us are perfect. My wife was standing in front of the mirror the other day. She's naked and she's looking. She says, "Look at me. Everything sags. I have wrinkles. I have spots. Tell me something good about myself." I said, "Man, your eyesight is perfect." Well, I almost ended up in the hospital with that one. But speaking about hospitals, a woman goes into the hospital. She's having a serious operation. The doctors say there's only a 10% chance of survival. I don't know if you're going to make it. She goes to bed that night. She has a dream. God comes to her and says, "Sadie Berkowitz, don't worry. You're going to be fine. You're going to survive. You're going to live 30 more years healthy." So the next day she has the surgery. She comes out of the surgery, wakes up. The doctors are in the room saying, "It's a miracle. Look at you. You're perfect. You're cured. You're ready to go home." She says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm living 30 more years. I'm having everything done. I'm having a tummy tuck. I'm having my breasts lifted. I'm having my tuchus built in. I'm having my Kardashian lips. Whatever I'm going to have it done." 3 weeks later, she leaves the hospital. She looks like a movie star. She walks outside. She's crossing the street. She gets hit by an ambulance and gets killed. She goes to heaven, and she says, "God, it's me, Sadie Berkowitz. You told me I had 30 more years." He looks at her and says, "I didn't recognize you." But anyway, it's Mike. Okay, good, thank you. So anyway, my wife loves dogs. She loves. I should have come back as a dog, because she hugs the dog, she kisses the dog. I haven't had that in 28 years. But she loves dogs. She got this schnauzer, wonderful little schnauzer, very hairy, very furry. She calls the dog, "Topsy, Topsy." And the dog jumps up and kisses, hugs, loves. So one day she comes home, the dog is laying there. She says, "Topsy." Nothing, no response. She drags the dog to the vet. She says, "Something's wrong with Topsy." The vet examines the dog, says, "I know what the problem is. The dog has hairballs in the ears, can't hear you." So the vet takes the hairballs out, and the dog perks up and happy again. And the vet says, "You don't have to come here. Go to the drugstore. You get something called Nair, and you put it in the dog's ears once a week, and it'll be fine." So she goes to the drugstore. She says, "Have you got Nair?" The druggist says, "Sure, here you go." And he says, "But be careful. If you use this on your legs, don't use lotion. It might sting a little bit." She says, "No, it's not for my legs." She says, "If you use it under your arms, don't use antiperspirant, because that could sting also." She says, No, it's for my schnauzer." He says, "If it's for your schnauzer, don't ride your bike for a week." But everybody likes pets. I have a friend, Mel, that his birthday was coming up. His wife didn't know what to get for him. He's a guy that has everything. So she's walking down the street. She passes a pet store. And in the pet, outside on the perch, there's a parrot. Beautiful, big, colorful parrot. And the parrot says, "Hey, hello there, lady. Come on, want to have fun?" So she says, "Boy, a talking parrot. It's a great parrot." So she goes in the pet store. She says, "How much is that parrot outside?" He says, $50. She says, $50 for that parrot? Parrots are so expensive. How come it's so cheap? He says, "Well, it used to work in a house of ill repute. And, I've sold the parrot 10 times. Everybody keeps bringing the parrot back." So she says, I'll take the parrot for $50, and sure. So he puts a cover over the cage, she takes the parrot home, hangs it up in her living room. You know, she gets home, she pulls the cover off, the parrot looks around and says, new whorehouse, new whorehouse. You know, the woman's, you know, kind of smiling, and the parrot looks at the woman and says, new madam, new madam. And then her daughters come in, they say, what's all the noise in here? And the parrot looks over at the daughters and says, new hookers, new hookers. You know, and then her husband comes in the front door, and the parrot looks over and says, oh, hi, Mel, good to see you again. But my friend, he used to like to be a gambler. He used to go to the racetrack, and one day he's on the way to the racetrack, and it's a windy day, and his hat blows off, and it's gone. It's 40-mile-an-hour wind. His hat is gone. Goes to the racetrack, and he gets there, and he looks at the racing sheet, and he sees the first horse is Brown Derby, 50-1. He says, I'm going to bet on the horse. I lost my hat. Might as well bet on a hat. So puts money down. Sure enough, the horse wins. Now he's got $100. Looks at the next race, and there's a horse, Easter Bonnet. Easter Bonnet, another hat. He puts all the money on Easter Bonnet, 100-1 horse. The horse wins again. The next race is another horse, Top Hat. Top Hat is also a long shot. He bets on that one wins. He goes home that night, and his wife says, where you been? She says, I went to the racetrack. She says, yeah, and you lost all your money? She says, no, I won $150,000. What? Where's the money? He tells her the whole story, how his hat blew away, he bet on the horses. He says, so where's the money? She says, well, on the last race, there was a horse running, and I figured I won every race. And I bet on the horse, his name was Chateau, and he lost. She says, Chateau? Chateau is not a hat. A chapeau is a hat. Chateau is a house. He says, I should have known better. Say, I would have lost anyway. Some Japanese horse named Yamaka won. Anyway, it's nice being here, and I'm happy that you've had me here tonight, and lots of love. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, now that we have had a good laugh, so when I first asked Jerry if he would come do this, he said, do I have to keep the jokes clean? And I encouraged him to, but clearly he did what he wanted to do, which was great. So we've had a good laugh. So now I want to introduce Vicki Weinstein-Finneyfrock, who is a nurse practitioner who specializes in psychiatric nursing. And she's going to tell us kind of, what that laughter is doing to our bodies and why it's so important for us. So this is more the educational session, but I think we'll still have some laughs also.
Thank you. If you can't hear me as I'm talking, do the old hand raise and I'll hold the mic closer. Thank you so much. That was great. I mean, really, another round of applause for good laughter. And now that everybody's been laughing, let's figure out why it is we feel so good, what's going on in our bodies, and how is it actually helping us. So it's my first time with the clicker. Let's try. Yep. So, is laughter the best medicine? Yes, there are real medicines that are better for certain illnesses and certain conditions, but laughter is free, no side effects, no contraindications. By that I mean you can't, laughter doesn't get in the way of any other medicine that you're taking, or if you have a certain condition, there's no reason you still can't laugh. No interactions with other medicines or treatments, and obviously very easy to access because we all just did that. So where did the saying come from? We think of it as a modern kind of a theme, but if you look back to the Bible, the book of Proverbs, Ketuvim, Proverbs 17.22, leave it to the Bible, A joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. And I put it there in Hebrew in case we have some quick Hebrew readers. I won't put you on the spot. So I thought I'd start a little bit with the history of laughter, and then after the history of laughter, I'm going to talk about some studies that have been done on laughter, and then kind of the science behind it all, and how do we keep laughter in our lives. So 14th century, way back, 1300s, Henri de Mondeville, a French surgeon, felt humor was an important part of the healing process. And what he would do, what he would prescribe, was to have people, family, friends, come in and make jokes or tell stories to cheer people up. And he found that that helped them to heal more quickly. A few hundred years later, Martin Luther, whose picture is there, the theologian, he used humor in working with depressed people and found that they too got better. He thought about it a little differently in the 16th century. He thought he was getting the devil out of the people, and that's why they were healing, but humor nonetheless. 17th century, Herbert Spencer, a sociologist, also used the relaxation methods to help people heal. So again, we think for those of you that are medically oriented or sociology oriented, Herbert Benson is a name that we know from the 1960s. This is way before that. And then in the 18th century, Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, and William Batty, a physician, also used humor to treat illness. So moving forward a little, Norman Cousins. Have people heard of Norman Cousins?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we kind of think of Norman Cousins as the father of humor and illness. He was born to Jewish immigrant parents in New Jersey, 1915. He actually, for most of his career, was known as the editor-in-chief at the Saturday Review, and he was a journalist, political activist, author, and a world peace advocate. He traveled the world really focusing on that. But what happened to him is in 1964, around the age of about 50, he was hospitalized with an illness that people just weren't sure what it was. He had weakness, pain, near paralysis of the legs, neck, back. They diagnosed it as ankylosing spondylitis. It's a degenerative disease of the connective tissue. So other diseases like when you have immunocompromised illnesses like lupus, illnesses like that, somewhat similar, sarcoidosis. What he did is he found that he was in so much pain, he would watch Marx Brothers movies or old reruns of Candid Camera. And by doing that, he found that 10 minutes of true, genuine belly laughter, from that, he was able to get 2 hours of pain-free sleep. What he did then in 1979, several years later, he wrote a book that became widely utilized, widely read, called The Anatomy of an Illness as Perceived by the Patient, with a whole focus on humor and laughter. Then what happened, he had a heart attack a decade later, and after the heart attack wrote a book on the healing heart, again with a focus on humor and laughter and how they help one to recover. So I figured to keep a dry, sciencey topic light, we need an occasional joke in here. And since he liked the Marx Brothers, I thought I'd put up one of my favorite Groucho Marx's quotes. Just give me a comfortable couch, a dog, a good book, and a woman. Then, if you can get the dog to go somewhere and read the book, I might have a little fun. And another one of my favorites was, and he said this a lot, I refuse to join any club that would have me for a member. My husband says that a lot. Other current history, during the polio outbreak of the 1930s, they actually brought clowns into the hospitals to cheer the children up. And they found, you know, given that they had no other solutions, that it really helped. You may have heard of Dr. Hunter Patch Adams. Have people heard of him? This is him over on your right. And this is the movie, Patch Adams, that came out. Robin Williams did that movie. So Patch Adams was in high school and hospitalized psychiatrically for depression 3 separate times. And during his 3rd admission, he decided there had to be something better than what he was getting at the hospital. So after he graduated high school, went to college, became a doctor, and started utilizing humor as a way to heal the patient. He began looking at the person holistically. In 1971, he founded the Gesundheit Institute, which he ran out of his home. He lived in a communal home, and he ran it there for about 12 years. He and his wife would treat the patients. He's still doing his work. He's been trying to build a hospital, but such as funding that for the past 50 years he gives great talks, but no real hospital. I also thought that I would just mention Comic Relief, which is an organization founded actually across the pond in the UK in 1985. And it was set up in response to the famine going on in Ethiopia. And again, this just speaks to how much humor really courses through everything we do in our lives, you know? So in 1988, that's when they began Red Nose Day, and I'm sure you guys have seen people wandering around sometime here with red noses on. That, believe it or not, we didn't get into the act until 2015, although many comedians here in the US participated and brought it over sooner. But in 2015, the US started a similar mission using the power of entertainment to promote positive change. So, this is a t-shirt that my husband found, and I'll read it. My kids accuse me of having a favorite child, which is ridiculous because I don't like any of them. My grandkids are my favorite. Right? So again, humor, we have to infuse humor into our lives. And I wore this, we were all together over the 4th of July, kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, great nieces, nephews, everybody. And my sister-in-law and I wore matching t-shirts. And we just put to rest, we really don't like any of our kids. We're there for the littles. So studies on laughter. And I'm just, for those of you, again, medically minded, if you want more information, I'm happy to get it. But I'm keeping it a little lighter instead of, going into the specifics on the studies. 2008 study showed that natural killer cells were more active against cancer cells after people were shown a funny video. Our natural killer cells, those are the cells in our body that we try to activate and wake up to fight cancer. More active just after watching something funny. 2011 study on the impact of endorphins, those feel-good hormones that run through our body after you exercise or laugh. They eased pain. The picture there, you can't quite tell, but it's a wine bottle in one of those wine sleeves. You leave it in the freezer and then you wrap it around the bottle of wine. What they did was they placed one of those on people's arms and they would see how long people could tolerate it. And what they found, those who laughed from watching funny videos didn't notice the pain and kept it on their arm for a much longer period of time than the other people. Other studies on pain tolerance support those same outcomes. More studies, a 2018 study showed that if you had type 2 diabetes, And again, I'm talking to a crowd where every illness is represented here this evening, I'm sure. But we worry about diabetes because of high blood pressure, because of risk for stroke, for heart attack, for plaque buildup, all of those things. So a study showed that people with type 2 diabetes, laughter therapy delayed those cardiovascular complications. It also correlates with fewer episodes of arrhythmias in the heart and recurrent heart attacks when you're in cardiac rehab. People with COPD, that's chronic obstructive lung disease, emphysema, chronic asthma, bronchitis. Laughter reduced hyperinflation of the lungs. That was my poor excuse for a little diagram, but it's the valve letting the air out because we have these little microscopic alveoli in our lungs, and what happens when you have emphysema, the air gets in but can't get out, and laughter reduced that hyperinflation. It lets the air out. Laughter decreased inflammation in people with rheumatoid arthritis. So we all have regular arthritis, right? Thumbs, knees, hips. But rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory illness, completely different than osteoarthritis. And with that illness, based on blood studies, the inflammation was shown to be reduced. This one I liked for this crowd, myself included. Humor therapy, comprised of watching 20 minutes of a humorous video, helps our cognition. And specifically what they were testing is delayed recall, right? 2 a.m. in the morning and you think of the word you were trying to come up with, or our learning ability, how to use a remote. It improves that by watching something funny. And just recently in 2020, researchers analyzed 21 studies, so it's a meta-analysis. But what they did was they looked at hospital clowns on more than 1,600 children. And what all of those studies across the board, when they pooled the data, found children exposed to the clowns did better with their outcomes of the procedures, improved psychological well-being. The parents, it didn't matter whether parents were there or not. The kids felt better going into the tests. And speaking of clowns, I found this. An Israeli medical clown visits with a young Israeli patient. This is Meyer Children's Hospital in Haifa. Apparently, in Haifa, at this hospital, they have a program on training people to be medical clowns. When I found this article, it looks like people from Europe were attending these programs. I couldn't find where they were from the US, but we are a little further perhaps to Israel, or maybe there are some programs like that here. But several countries were participating. Another little joke. 2 cannibals sitting around the table. The first one says, "I really don't like my mother-in-law." And the second one says, "Then just eat the noodles." So I use this joke, I should give my husband credit, because over the years, right, we have to be politically correct with how we tell jokes, and he sometimes wasn't. And so finally he said, "Fine, how about cannibal jokes? They don't have an anti-defamation league. They don't have anybody standing up for them. So in our house, we do a lot of cannibal jokes." And in fact, our kids sent us this. We had it framed and it hangs in our room because humor is only good if you look at it. So how does it work? It doesn't just make you feel good. It creates physical changes in your body. Actually, before I start this, any questions so far? You can raise your hand if you have one. So, how does laughter actually work? Well, you take in more oxygen-rich air, And that stimulates your heart, your lungs, and your muscles, right? A big deep breath does all of that. It increases your heart rate and your respiratory rate. Again, that's what helps with all that oxygen change, the air getting in and out of your lungs. It dilates your blood vessels. So it's not just that you're taking a big breath, but it actually dilates your blood vessels, increasing the blood flow and stimulating circulation. So you know how we get all that plaque buildup inside the blood vessel? And then as we get older, our blood vessels are a little less stretchy, a little less elastic. So you've got the plaque going in the middle, and the lack of stretchiness on the outside, and those are not happy blood vessels. Laughing changes that. Intense laughter strengthens muscle tone. How many of us have heard that saying, I laugh so hard, my stomach hurts? It's because you're using muscles. It's this, maybe yoga's a little better or Pilates, but you're using muscles. And it's much easier to laugh 10 or 15 minutes a day than to go to a Pilates class. It also stimulates our organs. It's a little bit of a weird concept, but our organs are surrounded by muscle. So as we get our muscles moving, it kind of massages the organs that it surrounds, which really helps to stimulate them. It also works if anybody's ever taken a yoga class. That's kind of my thing. When you're doing yoga, they always say, "Oh, this is good for your spleen," or "This is good for your liver." It's the same thing. It's because of the way we're moving, the way we're laughing, the way we're creating movement within our outside body, but also in the inside of our body. So we need to talk about cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and we need cortisol to work well. Same with adrenaline, right? Both are necessary and both are good up to a point. So stress hormones, that's our flight or fight response. When you're in a graveyard at midnight and somebody jumps out of the bush and scares you, and you get that rush of adrenaline and that rush of cortisol, that's good. We need that. We need to jump, we need to run. It also helps to regulate our blood pressure, our blood sugar, our sleep-wake cycle. Many of you may have heard that they can test cortisol in your blood, and it's supposed to be, you have more cortisol during the day, because we stay awake, less cortisol at night, because we're going to sleep, but only does it help in small doses. And when you think about stress, these are 3 different types of stress here. So there's acute stress. Again, you're in the graveyard. Somebody jumps out. You want it working for you. There's chronic stress. And I am guessing no one here, myself included, is without chronic stress. Chronic stress is caring for a loved one, caring for a family member or a spouse who has a chronic illness. And it goes on. Day after day, month after month. That's why they always say caregivers are the ones who get sick. It's not always the person who's ill that gets sick or dies first. It's often the caregiver. Other chronic stresses can just be, the bad weather outside that goes on, or the bad air quality that goes on this summer. There's a lot of different kinds of chronic stress. And that's the kind of stress that we need some good laughter. There's also traumatic stress. That's when we think of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So traumatic stress, obviously it's when you're in a war zone, or if you've been raped or abused as a child or an adult. Those are the obvious ones. But there are other traumatic stresses. Sometimes when we have an acute onset of an illness and end up in the hospital, that is a traumatic event. It's something we weren't planning on, we aren't coping well with, because we don't have the tools to do that. So traumatic stress can come from many sources. Laughter lowers cortisol levels. So high levels of cortisol contribute to weight gain, muscle weakness, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, and osteoporosis. It weakens our bones. And I chuckle because when it says weight gain, when you think about it, some people lose weight when they're stressed. I myself, not so lucky. I gain weight. But you hear people say that often. I've been under such stress, all I do is eat and I've gained weight. That is in part due to cortisol. Obviously the biggest part is I eat it, but the stress comes from the cortisol. So laughter lowers our cortisol levels. We can do other things to lower our cortisol level. Good quality sleep, regular exercise, maintaining positive relationships, and I'm going to come back to this a few times, and meditation. And with good quality sleep, it's interesting because my husband and I have different TV viewing habits, right? I like romantic comedies and regular comedies and lighthearted kinds of things, and he likes, as many men do, shoot 'em up, murder mysteries, action movies. I like those too sometimes, and I will watch sometimes one episode if it's on Netflix in the evening. But then he'll say to me, do you want to watch another one? It's about 9:30, and I'm like, yeah, right, no, I do not. And then I put on something lighthearted because I want good quality sleep when I get in bed. And if it means I'm laughing ridiculously instead of sitting with my heart going like this in suspense, wondering which character is going to die or blow up, I vote for the romantic comedy. So here's another meta-analysis that was done. This one was a smaller, so meta-analysis just means they pool the data from all the studies. This was 8 different studies, only 300 people. But what they showed is that the cortisol levels dropped almost 37% in the laughter group compared to the control group. That is a heck of a lot of dropping of cortisol. And the little picture, it's hard to read, but it was a laughter yoga group over here. Bring this with me. So in this laughter yoga group, what they did was they tested people who were doing laughter yoga, which is a thing. I've never seen it. Has anyone done laughter yoga? Talking to the wrong group here. But it is a thing where you just interact with people and you keep laughing for the whole time. And what they did was they measured, because you, again, can measure blood levels, they measured cortisol at the beginning of the session, and they re-measured in the same people at the end of the session. And it was a 28% reduction. It's pretty impressive. So here's another joke. And it says, it's 2 older gentlemen, and the first one says, you know what they say about getting older? And the second guy says, nope. And the first guy says, dang, I can't remember either. If you were at my last talk on cognitive changes, I used that, but it was just too funny, I had to use it again. So benefits of laughter, it reduces artery inflammation. We talked about that. We want healthy arteries to get us to 90 or 100. It increases our HDL, the good cholesterol. We want that also. We can do it by taking pills, and I'm sure most of us do. But laughter does it, that extra, kicks in that extra amount. It strengthens our immune system by releasing neuropeptides, and you may or may not have heard of things like serum immunoglobulins, A and E. That became a big thing actually back with HIV research when they were looking at how do we strengthen the immune system to fight some of these things off. And laughter does it. The pain response. I mentioned it earlier with that wine sleeve around the glass. It raises levels of endorphins, those feel-good hormones, which relieves pain. It also, in a different way, cools down your stress response, right? It's increasing cortisol, the endorphins are floating freely, and your stress response goes down. And it soothes tension by stimulating circulation and our muscle relaxation. Having done 50 years in psychiatry work, I would often have primary care docs who would send patients to me who had chronic pain. It might have been migraines, it might have been sciatica nerve, where the surgery just didn't do the job, all different things. And the clients would come in and they'd say, well, what can you do to fix it that other people haven't? And I would always say to them, I can't fix the pain. I can't make migraines go away. I can help you to live with the pain easier. Because a lot of our lives, starting not just at your age, but I'll put myself out there. At my age, I right now have plantar fasciitis. And, humor helps, right? Because I can't make it go away. You go to the doctor and they say, 2 months, 4 months, we'll see how it goes. So you live with pain. We all do. The long-term effects of laughter. Again, this is sort of a summary. It improves our immune system. We talked about that. It relieves pain, promotes the release of those neuropeptides that fight stress. It increases our personal satisfaction, which counts for a lot because it's easier to cope with difficult situations. And that really is where it's at as we get older. It improves your mood by lessening stress, depression, and anxiety. So, how do we add laughter to our lives? Well, we started the evening in a good way because we all got a good belly chuckle from Dr. Rosen, and that's one of the ways we do it. There is going to be a participation piece in a minute. But I'm going to give you a few of my ways. I'm going to come this way so I can see it. So find photos, greeting cards, comic strips that make you chuckle. Leave them out as you walk past. So this is one that our daughter Megan, who some of you know, she sent me for Mother's Day one year. And it says, good moms let their kids lick the beaters. Great moms turn the mixer off first. And then she wrote in parentheses, better moms make funfetti cakes. So I don't know if the men know what a funfetti cake is, but do women know it's those white cakes with the little color sprinkles in it? And apparently, I don't remember this,